when we get to the it depends thing, the consultant's value, I think, is to fill in the rest of the sentence. It depends on what. What is 4 plus a number? Well, it depends. It depends on what? It depends on what the number is that you're not telling me the identity of. Because if that identity is 12, and then 4 plus that is 16, 4 plus 3 is 7. It depends. 4 plus a number is different depending on what that number is. And sometimes it's a real chore to figure out, going back to Roger's example of, when do I want to set this parameter to a different value? What does it depend on? What depends on it? And yeah, the answer is it depends, but the value is to figure out, what does it depend on? And is it one of those things that if I double the value, it's going to not make hardly any difference at all? Or if I double the value, am I going to get a $250 Bronze Star award?
You'll be happy, Roger, that your previous statement was not recorded.
Okay, well, I think we may have repeated that one, but it is interesting.
All right, and I'm going to admit another mistake. All right, because I make them all the time. Mistakes are great. I did not hit record until just now.
Until just now? Very good. All the incriminating stuff is before that.
So all the incriminating stuff where we talked about my naked.
Oh, you said the N-word.
The N-word.
Now they know again.
Trump through Barcelona while on a Zoom call was not recorded. Roger's statement about a $250 bonus because he backed out a change that he recommended. And Cary, you're perfect. You have made no mistakes.
Right.
Yeah,
How do you do that? How do you do that?
We missed the great advice that speakers should feel a burden of responsibility for their listeners and do the work. So
that's true.
That is an incredible piece of advice, because it goes back to, I said, I will put in 100 hours to write a new talk. And after every talk, actually, I go back and I probably spend another, I'm going to say 10 to 20 hours, reworking my mistakes. Because I make mistakes all the time. Some of my mistakes are doozies, walking around naked while on a Zoom call. That happened. And also, taking the entire US State Department down because I did something somebody asked me to do without understanding what he wanted.
Oh, yeah.
I have a question for Cary. I was curious at what was it like as a young professional being called up on Saturday by Larry Ellison to help
It was Ray. It was Ray Lane.
All right. Okay. So you're doing diving catches left and right, it sounds like.
Yeah. It was kind of scary. That one particular story was a company in the I'm trying to remember if it was the LA area or the San Francisco area. Doesn't matter. I think it was a Bay Area company. But I was mowing my lawn. I had, at that time, I had to figure this out for the book because it's documented in this book that's going to be the O'Reilly book soon called Faster. But I think I might have had a little boy on my lap, like a little 1 or 2 year old boy, and I was on my little John Deere tractor cutting my 1 acre lawn. And my wife comes out of the house waving her hands, doing the cut the mower off thing. And she said, "Hey, you've got a phone call." Like, she didn't interrupt me mowing the lawn for a phone call. She said, it's Ray Lane. And she knew well who Ray Lane was. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I trotted up to the house, got on the phone. "Hey, Cary, it's Ray." And then it was mission impossible. We've got a customer that manufacturing and financials implementation of Oracle. They've got such severe performance problems that they can't ship product. They can't take orders. And they're literally at risk of going out of business. It's a multi-billion-dollar company. They're at risk of going out of business by Friday. They've sworn that if they go out of business, they're taking Oracle with them. So we need you to be there tomorrow on Sunday to get ready and attack this so that they're not in peril anymore. And so he let me pull whoever I wanted out of the company. I had some pretty sharp guys working for me that were on what we thought were important projects, but I was able to pull them and say, hey, I want you to fly on Sunday to California and meet me. We're going to go fix this one. And man, it accounts for 3 or 4 chapters in the faster book, the story there. But basically they were just, they made a lot of mistakes. There were a lot of fundamental errors that the company had made in trying to use the product. I'll give you one kind of dumb example. They had a list of things that were wrong that they called grievances. Now, the reason they used the word grievance is because they had attorneys crawling all over the place. In fact, it was hard to find a room to meet in when we got there because all the rooms were full of attorneys preparing for the, Armageddon on Friday that everybody expected to take place. So they had a prioritized list of grievances that they needed us to cure, another legal word. And, the top one was that they couldn't print shipping labels. Number 2 was something about the, whenever they would take an order, like a Walmart or somebody would call to make a multi-million-dollar order of their product, and they would have to ask the procurement person on the phone, hey, would you mind waiting about a half hour before I give you the order confirmation ID? Because their system's so slow, it takes a half an hour to get that confirmation ID out of the system. And so they had all sorts of problems like that. They had reports that used to take 10 or 15 minutes, and now they say they, quote, ran forever. And I'll tell you the answer to that third one. They actually, to kind of indicate how many mistakes that these guys had made, they actually had one of those password changer applications. I think I remember Accenture having one where every month or so, you're sort of forced into doing a password change. They'd had that occur, and the people who logged in to run the reports didn't have a new password because their password had expired. So some of these logins were automatic and some of them were actually people. Well, so the reports were never getting submitted because the login prohibitor was prohibiting them from logging in. So the way they interpreted that was, this report's not on my desk, it must be really, really slow. So that's the words that they used to explain it. We've got a really slow report. Well, what's slow about it? Well, I don't know. It's Oracle. We hate Oracle. Everything about Oracle is bad and evil and sinister and slow and crappy and atrocious, and we hate you. That's why we have all these lawyers. So you tell me why it's, and we found out, well, nobody's running it because their password expired. And you don't have a policy that accommodates the password expiring problem. So there were so many problems like that. It's just, well, just do this and that won't be a problem anymore. The little printer thing was because somebody had not started an FTP server after they rebooted a PC that was in basically a closet that was connected to the printer. Everybody's upstairs looking at the concurrent manager screens about Oracle printing shipping labels. And it goes, yeah, I printed those 3 hours ago, but yet UPS and FedEx and USPS and DHL and all those guys are sitting on the backs of their trucks, swinging their legs, drinking coffee, talking about last night's football game. And so that's maybe a little bit longer story, Roger, than you were thinking.
Well, I think
of,
that gets to it gets to the user experience, and I know I've heard you talk about that a lot
very
too,
much so.
and also the importance of being on the ground and seeing what people see rather than just what they describe. So what you were talking about was a disconnect between what people describe and what you actually see when you're on the ground. So there is, without that type of contact, it's hard to solve some of these problems, because if you just sat back in your office and weren't actually ever there, you wouldn't see that.
That's right on the nose. I mean, in this book here, the key phrase is look at it. And there are 2 operative words. There's look, like, how do I look? How do I look at a computer program is different from how do I look at a printer? And then what's the right it? Well, what's your problem? Not getting the report on time? Well, let's look at the report. Where does it come from? Who runs it? When, and really it's kind of taken the diagnostic world upside down to the way that I was originally taught when I joined Oracle in the late late 80s. You know, in the early 90s, people all taught, oh, you look at all these statistics and then you form a hypothesis about how the statistics relate to the thing that some business person is experiencing as a problem. And, you know, I learned from a couple of really good analysts that no, you flip that model. You go to the person having the problem, you watch what he or she's trying to do, and then you let that be your primary source of information for what to go do next. You don't look at a system and go, oh, or, you know, your kid's late getting a loaf of bread at the grocery store and you're like, why'd you take so long? Well, let me go feel his tires and feel if the tires on his bicycle are warm. You know, let me get the ratio of lubricated to unlubricated segments on the bike chain. Nobody would do that in real life, but that's kind of how we're taught to do it in Oracle back in the early 90s.
And you know, that kind of reminds me, one of the things I learned from you, Cary, and probably Maria, Kushan, a couple other people, is every now and then you take 3 steps back and you look at the big picture and you go, what is the question? What is the problem? Because we get up close to problems, and you know, we pretty much define our world as we solve problems. We get close to the problem and we're like going, how do I solve this?
Yeah.
Because in the end, that's what we do. We solve problems for our customers.
Well, and I'll tell you a skill that nobody talks about, but it's, you can't do without this. And it either has to be one person capable of doing all of it, or it has to be a small team where you can define the roles. But it's very hard to do what I call telescoping, where you come in and you go, big picture, let's figure out where to drill down. And then if you're one of the drill down people, like at this site I was talking about a while ago in California, I had 6 or 7 people come with me that I could assign tasks to. So I could say, Virag, you take the locking issue and drill in on it and fix it. Just focus on that. Nick, you take 2 people and go work on this other thing. I'll go look at the printer. It's hard for one person, especially one that's really good at being technical, because the reason that person's good at being technical is because he loves being technical. And I said he, but I mean he or she. And it's very difficult to take somebody who loves being technical, who loves focusing, who loves drilling down, and asking that person to zoom out and back away from the problem and see things like, are we working on the right problem? I had a guy one time, he ended up running a large part of the Americas Consulting Group. His name was Brian Cush, and he was pretty young when he worked for me. And he went to a customer site one time and he saw an even younger young lady working on a SQL statement, trying to tune it. And he said, what you working on? She goes, yeah, I'm working on this. It was like a translation program to get from one system to another. The data had to go through this code. And it was a migration script. And she said, yeah, I think I can make this thing run 10 times faster. And Brian looked at it and said, yeah, I see what you're doing. But he said, it's a migration script? She goes, yeah. He said, we migrated yesterday, right? She goes, yeah. He said, are we ever going to migrate again? She goes, no. He goes, so you're fixing a SQL statement that's bad, but nobody's ever going to run it again. Right? And she's like, yeah, yeah.
It was fun though.
Yeah, it was fun. And she was drilled in and she was probably doing extraordinary work on it, but it's hard. It's a thing that it's hard to keep both the zoom out and the zoom in your brain at the same time. And I've noticed that it's much easier for there to be 2 people that can play both roles. Just like Brian and the young lady were 2 people. Jeff and I are 2 people where normally I'll have Jeff drilling on something and I will zoom out, right? And try to make sure in the wingman role is like, okay, are there any other things in the sky that are going to kill us? I know we're focused on that one, but if there's 4 behind us, we need to know that too. And so it's very difficult. And I feel like I at least know the problem exists. And sometimes I can do it. I can drill in and then drill back out and then drill in and drill back out. But it's a lot more difficult to do that than it is to have multiple people have those roles as separate roles. You know, the drill in guy and the drill out person. If they're
But
separate,
the-
it's easier.
we're in a what's the word? Culture now. I don't know what the word is. How about drill in people and drill out people? I don't want to get canceled. But really, you know, you remind me of a client. It was a country who said TDE, transparent data encryption, sucks, performance sucks. We cannot do transparent data encryption, period, end of story. Therefore, all of their data was unencrypted. I will not say, and I will not say the name of the country. And I'm sitting there and I'm going, well, can you tell me how the original person did this that gave you this determination? Well, no, we can't do that. And so I start running all these different tests, and then I come up with the conclusion. The person did encryption at the row level, okay, encrypting every individual element, all right, which you can do in TDE. You can encrypt a column.
Yeah.
And when you encrypt a column, it has to go through an encrypt decrypt operation for every element. So if you have 5 million rows, you're going to do 5 million encrypt decrypt operations. Whereas if you're doing table space encryption, you're going to be encrypting at the block level. So depending on how many rows you pack into a block. So if you pack, 500 rows in a block, every encrypt decrypt operation applies to those 500 rows. And then which brings up another problem. The DBA who did the original test, who came up with this conclusion, was greatly insulted that I said, you did it wrong. Well, he didn't do it wrong. He just did it not the most optimal way. And so we also have to be able to communicate what is going on, so we don't offend the DBA who just didn't know better.
So there in this guy, there's a chapter late in the book. There's a whole section about political problems. And there's a chapter called Face. Chapter 105.
105 chapters?
It's got 111 chapters. The chapter's only a page or two long a piece.
Oh,
so
okay.
It's a very digestible, the kind of book that you can open to any random place and start reading and not have to invest too much into how long you've got to continue. But Face is a really serious issue. And well, I think Anyo Kolk. Do you remember Anyo?
Yes.
Anyo was one of my mentors at Oracle, and he spent a couple of years working on a project in Japan where he said the concept of face was something you had to deal with every single day, that it was more important to basically make sure that your colleagues were, emotionally strong about what you're doing and not feel like their honor had been taken away from them by suggesting that something they'd done be changed. Right? Because if you take a system that's in trouble, you have to change it. And if the change you're making undoes a change that somebody else made, well, that person loses face. And it's not so much the case in the United States in most places where you can just say, hey, listen, no hard feelings, but this parameter's got to be rolled back. Well, some cultures make that process much more difficult. And being aware of that can make you more sensitive, even in cultures where it's not that prominent, but really there is a thing like that going on. And in that Face chapter, I talk about an analyst who fixes a SQL statement, right? It makes a report go from 2 hours to 2 minutes. And then he's so jubilant, he runs into the boss's office and said, hey, I just made a report go from 2 hours to 2 minutes. And the boss very angrily says, who wrote that report? And you're thinking, oh God, what have I done? Right? What you should have done is found the person who wrote that report yourself and gone and said, hey, listen, I want to sit with you for a minute. I may be missing something, or maybe a functional spec that I'm not aware of or something just by looking at the code, but I think I can help you make this report go from 2 hours to 2 minutes. let's look at it together for a little bit. And what you might end up with is, you know what? Yeah, I made a mistake, but I can fix it. And there's also 6 other people in the department that I taught to do it this way. And so let's go fix them. Then you go to the boss and say, we found and we fixed a problem, not I, the hero, came in and makes one of your people look like an idiot. That makes you less apt to be able to sort of rally the people that you need on your side when the time comes.
Well, and that gets to, we all don't know everything.
Of course.
I have my specialty. Roger, you have your specialty. Cary, you have your specialty. If we were all to 3 sit down on the same problem to solve it, we might come up with 3 different solutions, but between the 3 of us, we would probably, and I hate this word, triangulate into a common solution where everybody looks good. And that's important.
It is.
Yeah, but it reminds me of a war story, and this was years ago. I was in a group, and I was with a company that just merged with another company, and we were having this sort of meet and greet in the auditorium. And it came to, and this was a very long time ago, because I only had 15 years Oracle experience at the time.
Only 15 years?
Yeah. And so I introduced myself as the Oracle guru, because I really liked Oracle, and I was doing this tuning and all this kind of stuff. And we get back to the office, and one of my coworkers comes up to me and he says, "You got some nerve introducing yourself as Oracle guru. There's a lot of people around here who know just as much about Oracle as you do." And I said, "Well, I've been using Oracle for 15 years and I, like it and so forth." So I said, "Oracle guru." So he goes, "Well, if you think you're so good, I got this performance problem I've been trying to fix for 2 days." And I had him describe it to me. And I said, "Okay, what version of Oracle are you using?" He said, "Version 8. And I said, "Well, did you know that in Oracle 8, you can have select statements in the select list, and you don't need to do this outer join, which is causing your performance problems?" And all of a sudden I could see the light bulb go on in his head. And he goes down to his computer and he types in, the SQL statement with the select statement in the select list, and he has a syntax error, fixes the syntax error. As soon as he hits return, data starts flying by the screen.
Awesome.
And I said, "Right here, right now, Oracle guru, and don't say another word about it." So we had the smackdown right there in the office. But, I didn't realize that somebody would be sensitive to that, in the corporate environment, to, how you describe yourself.
Yeah.
People are very sensitive. People are sensitive. Go ahead, Cary.
I try to resist labels of, well, just in general. I think it gets people in trouble.
I was having a hard time finding your title, because we had teacher, educator, et cetera. But I did see in Sintra, so that you're vice president. And I was curious how that sort of interaction in your role with Sintra works with your role at Method R.
Yeah.
Before you answer, Cary, can I ask a question? Is it vice president or president of vice?
It's the former. So Method R has been around since 2008, and it was formed by a small exodus of people from the company that I helped co-found in 1999 called Hot Sauce. So Hot Sauce lasted about 9 years, founded Method R in 2008, and have partnered with a few companies. Cary's Incotech group is one. I don't remember the year. I think it's around 2013, 14 that we joined Incotech, just as Incotech was being acquired by Accenture. And so my employment agreement there allowed me to run Method R full time and keep the products going and keep using time from the folks that I had with me that had joined Incotech and thus Accenture as well. 2 of my guys, one of them was working at Method R on a project with Apple. The project kind of went away, but then they had a new project. They wanted him back. And he actually worked for Apple on an Accenture contract, ended up leaving Accenture and becoming an Apple employee. Another guy stayed at Accenture and is still there. I left with Jeff Holt back in, I want to say 2018. I think 18, because we formed a relationship with this company called Cintra, Cintra, that was very interested in what our Method Art technology was able to do. So they wanted to pair it with their consulting services and saw a lot of synergy there. So when COVID hit, one of the cuts that Cintra made to kind of stay alive was they cut Jeff, who's the co-author of the so-called B book, and kind of put me in a reduced capacity so I have more freedom to do Method Art things. So I'm pretty much full-time Method Art stuff. Occasionally Cintra asks me to help them with things, which I'm grateful for the opportunity to do. I'm not really full-time there, so my full-time job every day is Method Art type stuff. And even when Cintra calls me, they know what the Method Art stuff is that they, get the highest rate of return on asking me to do. So our relationship is tight and cordial, but not too time consuming at the moment.
Interesting. Actually, I found out with my contract, so not with Accenture, but with the company I'm contracted with, that I'm vice president of IT project management.
You're vice president of IT project management while you are an employee of Accenture.
Yep. Well, that's and I have no idea how I got that title, but they just gave it to me, and I said, okay, it sounds interesting, but
quick, turn the recording off.
Hold it.
Well, no, I haven't stated the name of the company, because that would be a violation. But
okay, now we're back.
Make sure you clap so you got a good waveform you can edit to.
So back to aviation.
There you go. I was hoping we'd get around to that.
Yeah, and we always talk about aviation. Cary, you and I, we go back to the point we were discussing before I hit record on the this seminar. And I learned your family is very big in aviation in the Dallas area. Here is a question I've never asked you. Can you please explain that to me? Who did what when? Was your father like, a drinking buddy of one of the Wright brothers?
I'm kind of curious as to what you're picking up there. My dad was a pilot for United Airlines. It was something he always wanted to do, and he knew which company he wanted to do it with. And I think back when he joined, United Airlines is kind of the prestigious carrier in the US back. He probably joined the airline in around 1964 or 5. And had previous to that been a crop duster and a coffin carrier and anything you could think of just to get hours. And he always told me as a kid, he applied to United 7 times before they didn't reject his application.
Okay.
But he passed away a good number of years ago now, but when he retired from United, he was a 767 captain and had just prior to that been a first officer on 747, where he flew mostly Chicago, Seattle, Narita and back, kind of, long legs. We lived in Oklahoma. That's where his home always was, past about 1968 or so, 68 or 69. And we lived on a small farm, 80-acre fish farm in Oklahoma. And he had to drive 2 hours to get to an airport and then fly 2.5 hours on another carrier, either American or Braniff, to get to Chicago where his domicile was. So he tried to bid lots of contiguous trips. So he'd be home 3 or 4 days and he'd be gone 3 or 4 days. But he spent a lot of money commuting so I could grow up in a little town in Oklahoma instead of in a gang in Chicago, I guess. But that was my dad.
I have a funny coffin carrier story. One of my original ANPIAs, which if you're not familiar, aircraft power plant mechanic with inspection authority because I own a plane. One of the original ANPIAs, he carried corpses for morticians to other places. And he is in an airplane one day and he tells me this story. And this corpse is laying beside him. Okay, they took the co-pilot seat out and corpse is just laying there. And apparently with corpses, they tend to move even after they are dead.
Yeah.
I was not aware of this.
Especially when you change air pressure on them.
Oh yeah. And he's flying one time at night and this corpse almost sits up. He said he damn near crashed the plane.
My dad talked about they would moan and groan, like the throat would close, you know, during the embalming or whatever, but then the pressure difference in the, you know, at altitude would open it up and then bah, you know, you think you're alone and you're always at night in the dark flying these things around. And this dead guy's talking to you. My dad told me stories about that.
Yeah, I'm not going to carry corpses in my airplane. No, it's not going to happen.
Good to know where you stand on that.
No, no. My retirement is I am going to fly banners along the beach.
Along the beach.
Yep.
Drink Corona.
Yep. It's like,
will you marry me?
Yeah. Will you marry me, Becky? You know, my only problem is right now, my place in Delaware. Okay, I'm in Maryland now, my house in Maryland, but I have a house in Delaware. My house in Delaware is 4 miles from President Biden's holiday home. And so whenever President Biden is in town, nobody flies. Go figure. But my job, I want my job to be is I will be the guy flying along the beach with that sign. I do not have to talk to air traffic control. I do not have to talk to anybody. Occasionally send out a radio broadcast turning south at Cape Henlopen. You know, that's it. For me, that will be an easy retirement. And I can't imagine anything better right now.
Yeah, I was gonna jump in, and normally we close after about an hour, but I think that I'd like to ask Cary what he thinks the future of performance optimization looks like in terms of emerging trends and technologies. We, you know, see a lot of AI, and Oracle has a big sort of big idea that you know, with the autonomous database, essentially will be completely hands off for the most case. But I know that you have your tracing and it's all metrics based, and there's a lot of human involvement in those solutions as well. So just curious as your view is on that.
Well, the AI thing has finally switched in my mind from we'll see to, oh yeah, it's coming and it's going to be amazing. The thing that I hope will happen is instead of an AI being pointed at a bunch of statistics inside of, you know, our $V tables, the AI will be pointed at knowing exactly how long the transactions and experiences that people are having are taking. Because the whole reason that I got called into the deal off my lawnmower was because nobody had been looking at the experiences that people were having. They were looking at system statistics. And if you point an AI at system statistics, it's going to just come up with crappy recommendations faster. But if we can point our technology, and this is what I'm trying to do every day with, you know, there's a certain amount of choosing that I do when I decide whether to write a book or not. And the fact that all these books that I've written line up in the same direction of, damn it, look at the right it, and then what measurements do we have that possibly allow us to explain the it that we're looking at? And I don't do these things because of trace data. I do trace data because of the way that customers demand that I look at their problems. So I'm really hopeful that Oracle will continue to kind of open up some of the tracing abilities. When Oracle first released Autonomous Database back in, what was it, 19 or something? It had no
Yeah.
tracing feature whatsoever. But I don't care how highly automated your system is, it needs to be observable, because the people that make the system itself can make mistakes, right? Oracle has, through the 30 years or so that I've been associated with them, they've made a lot of improvements to the Oracle database kernel because of feedback given to them by data, such as trace data, such as traces. And so I'm optimistic that tracing is not going to go away. One of the things that I have to do occasionally is take 2,000 or 3,000 trace files and make sense of them real quick. We've got tools that within 15, 20 minutes, I can make sense of 1,000 or 2,000 trace files. I look forward to being able to do more AI types of things with large data sets like that. And yeah, I don't know where it's going to take us, but to me, that's kind of the first step or two that's gonna intrude upon my world. And in our product, we'll eat a trace file and then print out recommendations in the forms of English sentences as to what to go do. And we've done this now for nearly 10 years. So, AI is going to make that probably easier to pull off, might expand the scope of data that gets considered in providing those recommendations. So I'm optimistic. I'm also a little bit scared. I think anybody with any sense, right? If you're a truck driver, people are like, oh, we're not going to need those anymore in 10 years because trucks are going to drive themselves. Food preparer, nope, we got robots that are going to prepare all our hamburgers for us. So I don't know where as a society it ends. What are people for? I don't know. I kind of feel like I'm here to work. So if you take all my work away from me, what's left? What am I?
Well,
And
it sounds like, actually, one of my thoughts were in some of my own work analysis of Oracle performance metrics was if you could train your system based on known problems. So in other words, have a way of saying, okay, this set of trace files represents this known problem, and we have a known solution for that, then that's kind of better than just pointing AI directly at the performance metrics themselves without the AI knowing what kind of or class of problem it is that you're dealing with.
Yep.
I think it gets back to it depends. Because we're when we look at problems, and I wish I could think of a way to articulate this properly right now, but there are a whole lot of variables that come into mind where it's like, AI is looking at the $V tables. Okay. But my CFO needed his report 30 minutes ago. And why isn't it on his desk? Okay. And it could get back to someone didn't turn on the FTP server.
Mm-hmm.
It could be many things. So what I think is AI is going to be a tool that we use as it just augments us. It takes off some of the workload.
Yeah, I hope so.
I don't think it's going to ever replace us.
It may replace some mundane things, but
well, trivia. Did you know the word robot comes from the Romanian word for drudgery?
oh, really?
Mm-hmm. And there's also similar Russian word, but it's the word for drudgery. So I think AI is going to handle a lot of those issues. It's like It's something we give to the kid who is straight out of college. Figure it out.
That's his best practices.
It's best practices, yes. And then,
Considering that we're over, I just want to touch with Cary and find out, Cary, if he wants to go on, or he wants to give us some closing thoughts for our listeners.
I'll be happy to go on if you'll give me a 1.5-minute break.
Okay.
have a minute and a half. I will edit it out.
I'll be right back.
And I will be right back too. All right.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Now, this would have been a funny time to come back in a blue shirt.
Yeah, I could have changed into my I normally wear a black shirt, but so for some reason Rob and I both got blue shirts on today, which was not planned, but it just so happened.
And
Hey,
they,
did you know in Maryland, recreational marijuana is now legal?
Did not know that.
is that life changing?
No, not for me.
It'll make your cough worse, at least.
And the only reason why I say that is because as I was pouring myself a glass of wine, that's what came to mind.
I see.
That, and I was staying at my sister's place back around Christmas, and my cough was really bad because I had pneumonia. And it turns out they were growing marijuana in the room that I was staying in. And I slept better than I'd ever slept in a long, long time. And my sister's like going, it's the plants, it's the plants.
Huh.
And I'm like going, okay, why do we have these issues?
Goodness.
So where were we?
We were going to continue or give Cary some opportunity for some closing thoughts.
Yeah, we were talking about AI, which I really don't have a lot of cogent things to say about.
Have you tried Chat GPT?
No, I haven't. I got real close to what is it? It's not called Wall-E, but it's some kind of art generator. I got real
Okay.
close to trying that, and I got to the paywall, and I thought, I don't want to spend $15 on this right now. So I haven't messed with either one. I've really been messing with 23C just since it's been out, what, Monday or something, and trying to get tasks done. I'm in the drill down mode right now. I've made my decision as to what I'm going to focus my time on for the super near future. I don't know. We covered a number of things. I don't remember what all we did before the recording started, but I'm happy to talk about anything you guys want to. And about 10 minutes or so, I need to bolt.
Yeah, you told us a little bit about I guess hit or not hit or miss, but different areas of the faster, how to optimize the system. I guess one of my questions is what inspired you to write it, and what are some of the key takeaways? I know you said look, that was a key word.
Yeah.
You want people to observe.
Yeah, thank you for asking that. I've long planned to write down what I know. I've been helping people fix systems for about 3 decades. And there's some patterns that I've learned, and I wanted to write those down. So if you kind of transform your mind back to 2019 and 20, in the big fat middle of the COVID pandemic, every day we're told we're going to die, right? There's lots of people dying, and it's all very morbid. And I thought, if I'm going to get this written down, I better do it now. There are a couple of reasons. One is the economy kind of fell out from underneath me. There weren't really that many things to do, but I wanted to occupy my time. So I started writing down my book about performance, right? And when I first started writing it, it kind of started like a math book, definition of performance. Well, there's two types of performance. There's throughput and there's response time. And here's the math that relates them. And I got about 20 pages into that, and I just couldn't stand looking at it anymore. And it occurred to me one day that, hell, if it bores me, what chance does it have that somebody else is going to want to read it? So I thought, well, how do I tell my stories in a way that'll resonate with a broader audience? And I don't want an Oracle audience for this book. I want this book to be anybody who cares about how fast stuff is, your airport or your dinner or, your car. And so I knew the answer, because when I go out and I speak, people love stories, and they love for me to start with a story. And then if there's some theory to be learned from the story, they'll permit me to talk about that if the story was good enough. And so it occurred to me that I should write the book that same way. And so stories about being yanked off my lawnmower are early in the book. And that's really the formula that I use for the book, is tell a story and then have 3 or 4 short chapters that elucidate on the lessons of that story. And the stories are all named for different people that I've met. So there's a chapter called Bob. There's a chapter called Phyllis. There's a chapter called Deborah. There's a chapter called Kevin. There's all these chapters about different people that I've worked with. And I basically tell my family and friends, it's a professional autobiography, written so that my mom could understand it. And literally, my mom was the first technical reviewer of the book. And she's not a technical person. She's roughly 80 years old. She's smart, but she's not a computer geek or anything. And she's interested in reading about what her son does. So I'm fortunate that she is. And I asked her, I said, anytime your eyes start to glaze over and you get a little bored, you get to that point where you're like, oh, I read that paragraph, but I have no idea what it just said. I said, make a note of that, because when that happens, I need to rewrite. I either need to throw that paragraph away or make it more interesting for you. And so it became a book about everything I've done at work for the last 30 years.
That's interesting. I know in my book, my wife read a lot, and I would do some hand waving. She would say, what does this mean? And I would start doing hand waving. She's like, forget it. You can't do hand waving. You have to put it in there so that it's understandable.
Yeah.
And that gets to what I do with, like, when I wrote my last book, or when I give a talk, I run it past my mother, who's over 80 years old. And when her eyes glaze over, I tend to notice it. And I go, well, if my mama can't understand it, then
not ready yet.
It's not ready.
Yeah.
And that's like, yeah. Also, when I wrote my first book, or no, my second book, excuse me, I had enough contacts at universities around the world where I sent chapters out to professors and said, please give this to your students. If they have questions, please let me know. If a university student, if their eyes glaze over, and these were IT students, then I'm explaining it to Cary Millsap or Roger, as opposed to somebody who needs to learn.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just a thought.
No, I like it. I just spoke with a O'Reilly marketing rep yesterday who got me excited about all these programs they're going to put the book through, and it's going to show up on Safari and all that kind of stuff. And I've done this before, because that first book was an O'Reilly book back in 2003. So I look forward to seeing this process kind of start to bear fruit, and I'm hopeful. I think this book, the original O'Reilly book here, I think it moved about 15,000 copies. And I'm hopeful. When I wrote this one, I really wanted it to be a Harper, McGraw-Hill, or Penguin or something like that, where it would show up at airports. That's my fantasies. I'll get on an airplane one day and there'll be somebody carrying my book on an airplane, and it won't be a DBA. I love if a DBA wants to carry my book on an airplane. Don't get me wrong, but I'll be really tickled if it reaches an audience that's outside of the traditional people that might have heard my name before.
And that's the best thing, is we can reach a bigger audience.
Hope so.
Because really what we do is, a lot of us is people in the Oracle world know who we are. All right. It's not an arrogant statement. It's just fact. I would rather, as you said, Cary, get on a plane and see, I'm going to say a kid, but I don't want to mean a kid, any general public actually interested in what we've done and how to solve problems, because again, it gets back to what we do. We solve problems.
Well, here's a flattering thing that happened a few weeks ago. I'm friends with my dentist. He's a parent of another girl that my daughter plays volleyball with. And he's like, "Oh, you wrote a book. I'm really curious, you know." And he said, "Yeah, I bought your book. It's going to be 3 or 4 weeks before Amazon gets it to me." And then I see him at a volleyball tournament. He goes, "Oh, my book came in." I said, "How'd you like it?" He says, "I have no idea. My office manager took it away from me." I was like, right on. Your office manager wanted to read it.
But
I would love for that to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. You are reaching a wider audience. Like me, when I speak to university students, I frequently teach them, argue both sides. You know, if you have a position and then there's an opposite position, argue both sides of the position, have the debate within your head, because usually the truth lies somewhere in the center. And that applies all over the world, and almost any subject.
Well, I tried to instill this principle in my children, you know, of being able to speak about things, you know, to anybody, really. And my middle son, while he was working on his PhD in nuclear engineering, we would occasionally ask him about, you know, how things were going, or, you know, tell us something, you know, the elevator speech or whatever about his research and so forth and so on. He would just say, "Well, you wouldn't understand." So he never really even made an effort to try to you know, talk about it so that normal people could understand.
But wouldn't it be, go ahead.
You have to be interested in doing that to be any good at it, because it's hard.
It is very difficult. Gets back to before I hit the record button. I spend 100 hours writing a presentation so that people can understand what I'm actually saying.
Yeah.
I run it by my mother. If my mother's eyes glaze over, I need to go back to the drawing board. You know, my wife, Candy, she's a CPA and a CFE, one of the smartest people I know. I can explain things to her and she gets it, but when she explains accounting to me, my eyes glaze over. You know, she knows her shit. I have a difficult time sometimes processing what she says. And I'm not the incredibly intelligent, but I'm smart enough to figure it out.
Yeah.
So, Cary, it is good to see you.
You too.
Thank
you
very
both
good
for
to have
inviting me.
I wish I hit record earlier, because people will have no idea what we were talking about earlier, especially walking around naked on a Zoom call.
Well, it wasn't quite naked, but.
Well, yeah, I did have my underwear on.
Naked enough.
Yeah, I'm sure screenshots were sent to HR.
God.
All right.
Thank you very much. I'm going to try to get down to Dallas sometime and let's have a beer. I know this great Mexican restaurant. It's called Taco Bell.
They got them up there in Maryland, huh?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I,
Thanks
I think
again,
I'd
Cary.
I think I'd still rather eat a Taco Bell than see you in your underwear.
You would.
Roger, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Good to have you.
All right.
Peace.
Thank you very much. You guys have a great day. Okay.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.